let's get into our G5 high five, and I'll mention my first pick here. SMU Maryland. So the total is set at 74. I like over, and it's because I watched all of Charlotte and Maryland on purpose, tracked it down on Stadium, streamed it for free. Oh man, where do I begin here? Talia Tagovailoa is incredible. He's coming off his best game in college, nearly 400 total yards, 5 touchdowns. The passing game and running game are working in perfect harmony. Maryland's going to be able to score a lot of points in this game. But zeroing in on their defense, who actually did a nice job in week 1 against Buffalo, they were playing a Charlotte team on a third-string quarterback. They actually ended up playing a fourth-string quarterback in this game. They almost threw for 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 picks. Maryland was unable to get pressure on them. That's bad news against an SMU passing attack led by Tanner Mordecai. Rice on the perimeter. These guys are going to eat in this game. It's going to be who has the ball last. And from a tempo perspective, I think they're both going to play quick. They want to get in rhythm. 74, once again, having really held back from some of these high totals this year, I'm ready to go all in here on week 3 on some of these high numbers. Over Terps Mustangs. I like it. Any reason to not go with the over in College Park, and which should be kind of perfect weather conditions in College Park on Saturday night.
I'll be honest, I bet this over 3 days ago. I got it at 69.5. So Ooh. I guess that would be my only reason not to bet 74 is because I already have 69. Nice. I will touch more about this game coming up.
All right. How about your first addition to our G5 high five?
I'm taking it over too. Let's keep the shootout going. This is kind of a gross one. It didn't work last week. I think we got a voicemail about how much someone hates Dana Holgorsen, but I'll go ahead and back him again. I'm taking over 56.5 in Kansas at Houston. Not to be spoiler alert. Do you know who leads the nation in scoring?
The Kansas Jayhawks.
Yeah, baby. They do.
Now is their time. It's like 2007 all over
55.5 points per game. They are 4th in the country in offensive success rate. Jalen Daniels isn't the most explosive passer, but he's completing 70% of his passes this season, and he is an explosive runner. And him, Daniel Hishaw, Devin Neal, they're all averaging over 50 yards per game on the ground this year. Devin Neal is averaging 10.7 yards per carry. Obviously, it's not going to continue, but this dude is a human home run reel. And Kansas is 7th in the country in rush play explosiveness. They have scored, and they have scored quickly. They're also averaging 5.6 points per opportunity, which is getting past the 40-yard line. And that is something Buffalo was really good at when Lance Leipold was their coach as well. So that's I love Lance Leipold. Buffalo was that team I bet literally every week, pretty much that year they made it to the MAC championship before losing to Northern Illinois. I love Leipold. I love what he does with his teams. I love how quickly he turns them around. And he's very good at finishing in the red zone, which is something Kansas has been good at this year. On the flip side, we talked about him a ton. Tune and Tank Dell. They're already in great rhythm. He's got 12 catches, 170 yards, and 2 TDs. He's a monster. There is nobody in that Kansas secondary that's going to be able to slow him down. Houston, they allowed 441 total yards to UTSA, 468 yards to Texas Tech. Another huge thing for over. Houston's had both their games go to overtime. So there's always a chance this game goes forever. We saw it last week with the Houston Texas Tech over. We were on, it was like 3-0 at halftime, and we still got the push because they went like 3 overtimes. Kansas defense was last in the country in EPA per play last season. They just allowed 501 yards and 355 yards passing to West Virginia. Is JT Daniels even good? I don't know, but he torched this Kansas defense. And, Houston lost a ton on the defensive line. We talked about that a lot. But one thing I feel like haven't talked about enough is, and we've seen it, is the loss of cornerback Marcus Jones. He was kind of their Swiss Army knife in the return game, but I feel like every episode we've talked about Houston, we've talked about, Sack Avenue and losing, Hall and stuff like that. Marcus Jones has been a huge, huge loss on that secondary because they have been torched through the air. They've allowed 688 passing yards in 2 games. They've allowed 31 pass plays of 10 yards or more. Only 5 teams in the country have allowed more. So like I said, Kansas doesn't have the most dynamic passing attack, but if they can get a couple big plays through the passing game, run the ball, they've been able to. And then on the flip side, I think Houston's offense is going to keep doing what they've been doing. Over 56.5. Again, Kansas is averaging 55 a game themselves. So 56. We need Houston to score 2 points, and this game goes over. Give me the Kansas, Houston over 56.5.
Yeah, lock that one in. It takes 2 to tango on and over, and Kansas is finally pulling its weight, and the defense has improved, but not enough to slow down a veteran Houston passing attack. And I agree with you. I'm glad you brought up Jones in the secondary. Doug Belk is somebody that we love. We've sung his praises, but it is not looking so good in that secondary for Houston. And there's not a lot you can do. They can't bring in anybody in the portal. You are at this point. So they are going to get havoc plays. They're going to be able to get a pass rush on Kansas in this game. But I think you can pretty much bank on Kansas scoring 28. And then at that point, it becomes very realistic for Houston to pull its weight and push this thing over. All right, I'm going to go with my first side of the day here. I'm going to go with the Roadrunners plus 11.5 at Texas in just a primo letdown spot. You couldn't have burned any more emotional capital than the Longhorns did against the Crimson Tide. They also lose Quinn Ewers at least for 6 weeks. Card is also banged up. So where does that leave Houston laying double digits at home in a game where I can guarantee you UTSA fans have wanted to play Texas since they jumped up into this level of football? They're going to travel from San Antonio and have some kind of presence at DK Royal Stadium. So all of this being said, I'm on the Roadrunners here. I'm a little bit nervous just because Frank Harris has been tremendous. They're averaging 38 points a game, 6-1 touchdown interception ratio. The receiving core, we are all about these guys. Zachary Franklin is not the only one at this point, but he's the one leading the way. But this defense just gave up 304 passing yards to Army. Just for perspective, in the COVID year, Army was able to sneak in 12 games. They threw for 537 yards all season. So to give up 300 yards to Army is kind of like giving up 900 yards in a single game defensively through the air. I'm going to stick with it. I just have this feeling situationally that this is a perfect spot for UTSA, having bounced back from their overtime loss against Houston, getting an overtime win against Army. I said earlier in the season, I thought they would go 2-1 out of the gate. So I'm going to need them to upset the Longhorns here, but they have the offense to do it. And if it's a slow, sleepy start for Sarkisian's bunch, I think this is the kind of G5 veteran team to take advantage of it. What are your thoughts on the Roadrunners making the short cross-state trip to Austin?
Yeah, I agree with you. I definitely love this spot. I feel like I'm more concerned about UTSA as a whole than I was at the start of the year, just given their defense has looked really bad, which is concerning. We thought McCormick would be the big loss, but I mean, like, they haven't really, it's not like they're running the ball any, I haven't really noticed that. It's more the defense to me is an issue. But we talked about, I'm trying to think of it like off the top of my head. I don't know that there's a player in the country over the last like 3 years. I mean, maybe Clayton Tune, who's more improved than Frank Harris has been over the last 3 years. I mean, he has gone from a legitimate liability to like carrying that team on his back.
He
You
was
could
simply the guy who handed the ball off to Sincere McCormick, and
he
now
was
he's a guy who will finish top 10 in QBR in the entire
he
country.
was one of those quarterbacks that every game it's like as long as Frank Harris doesn't turn the ball over or make any mistakes, they're gonna win. Now it's like as long as Frank Harris can drag this team and outscore their opponent. So I do love Frank Harris. I think it's a big enough number. I wouldn't take it probably past 10, but I think it's a sleepy spot. I do agree with you that I like getting those points.
How about your next pick to add on to our high five?
Yeah, so I'm gonna lay the points with Memphis against Arkansas State. Anyone who listened to our previews with Colin before the season knows all three of us hate Arkansas State. And while we faded Memphis, I faded Memphis against Mississippi State, and they understandably struggled in that game. But last week we kind of got the Memphis Tigers that we expected, especially on offense. Heading in was 24-34, 415 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, Gabriel Rogers. We talked about how would they replace Calvin Austin. Gabriel Rogers, Javon Ivory, Joseph Sicades, Eddie Lewis, Javon Ducker, all of them had catches over 25 yards last week. Memphis is fourth in the country in explosiveness, which is something we thought they'd lose without Austin, and they really haven't. Arkansas State is 128th at defending explosiveness. They just give up big plays like it's their freaking job. They finished last season 129th in total defense. They returned just 2 starters on defense. I don't have many stats to ramble off here because it's kind of hard to use many of Arkansas State stats from this season because they absolutely pumped Grambling week 1. Then they got crushed by Ohio State. So neither of those are like real data points because every team would get trashed by Ohio State and then every team would beat Grambling. So I'm not really going to just go and listen to all these stats. But again, if you listen to our previews, we think Arkansas State stinks. I like Memphis. I think this defense should pick apart Arkansas State and have big play after big play. And I think they're going to run it up. And I think they're going to do it quickly. So I'll lay 14 with Memphis. I think they win by 3 touchdowns.
I like this little exercise preseason when there's a team that we are laser focused in on being bad and potentially fading them throughout the year. I like to go through and set the hypothetical point spread for the first 6 games, with my hope being that they play better than expected in the games that I'm not necessarily playing. I had this one as 3 touchdowns. So the fact that they lay a huge number on Grambling and then play a competitive, first 20 minutes against Ohio State and kind of hang around. Ohio State, for whatever reason, has a little bit of issues in terms of their play calling. I still don't think they're giving Henderson the ball enough. But because of that, I think there's at least 3 or 4. I would stretch it all the way to 7 points worth of value baked in here. So I really like that play. And I think this is the opportunity because I believe they finished the month against Old Dominion. So this is probably the one of, if not the last time, to get a really good number fading Arkansas State. All right, I'm going to jump in. It's over week. Going to go with another over here. 61.5 UCF FAU. From a fantasy perspective, I was watching Central Florida and John Rice Plumlee really struggle to get anything going against Louisville last week on Friday night. But having watched that game, 2 long touchdowns called back totally changes the complexion of the game. And I think that has artificially reduced this number because when you look at these two offenses, between Plumlee and Javon Baker, an Alabama transfer, they have a really good connection that has continued. He's averaging 17 yards per reception. And then on the FAU side, the Owls are cooking offensively, 41 points per game, 530 yards. That's ninth nationally. And when I think about exactly what I'm getting on the FAU side of the ball, N'Kosi Perry and LaJohntay Wester are a really good connection, but their running game has picked it up. This was a team that I thought would be, struggling, that drive to 6, try to get to bowl eligibility, having to win some shootouts. But now they're 22nd nationally with 232 yards per game on the ground. They kind of do it running back by committee. They also get Perry involved in the running game a little bit. I think there's just a lot to like for either one of these teams scoring north of 30 points on their own. So 61.5, I think, is generous. My projections here have it at 66.5. So I'm going to go ahead and play this one. I think it's a bounce back spot. It was a weird play call game for UCF. Malzahn was really, really conservative. There were 2 drives into Auburn territory in the first half where he punted on a 4th and manageable. Didn't really make a whole lot of sense given his track record of being aggressive and playing fast. And on top of everything else, with a running quarterback where the numbers can work in short yardage situations on quarterback draws, leads, RPO kind of stuff. So I think they're going to get that corrected with the extra time. They have, 2 days of extra prep for this one. I like over 61.5. Is there anything that I'm missing? Defensively, wasn't impressed with the Knights. The Owls definitely haven't given me any extra on defense to think that they can hold them under 28 points. Is there anything I'm missing here in this Sunshine State battle?
I'll be honest, I very much toyed with playing this under.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I
Lay it on
did.
me.
So once we don't usually tell each other what we're picking, but a little birdie told me you're on the over. So I'll be honest, I didn't do like the full deep dive in research because I knew you were on the over. I didn't want to pick against you. But just my gut reaction was like, watching the UCF Louisville game last week, Plumlee is so dynamic with his legs, and he showed that, but he just looked so bad passing the ball last week. 16 to 34, he had 131 yards passing on 34 attempts, no touchdowns, 1 pick. That's so bad. And then, like, yeah, Malik Cunningham torched them on the ground, UCF, but I actually thought UCF did pretty good against like just the running backs. They kind of held them in check. It was just Cunningham burned them. And then you mentioned the FAU; they have run the ball well. No one knows what's going on with Johnny Ford. Every week, Willie Taggart comes out and it's like, yeah, he was out for personal reasons, but he's probable next week, and then he just doesn't play. But yet he's like on the sidelines, like part of the team. So it's like he's not like suspended or kicked off the team or like hurt. He doesn't even look hurt. Like, I mean, I don't like speculating, but like he's probably just like academically ineligible and can't get on the field until he gets his grades up. So like, who knows if that even happens? So it's like they're running the ball okay, but they still don't have their best running back. I still believe in UCF's defense. Like I said, we talked about it in the offseason because I'm obviously high on them, that they brought in a ton of transfers to shore up the D line. They bring back their entire secondary. And I think they're going to be able to put pressure on Taggart or on Perry, well, and Taggart. But that's kind of when Perry struggles against those better competitions, the good secondaries and the teams that can put pressure on him. So I don't really believe in N'Kosi Perry. I like Plumlee, but I just don't they're throwing him a lot and he's not good at it. And then when they run the ball, it works. I do like Bowser. I don't know. I think these are two teams that are better when they run the ball. and I don't think their defenses are both that bad. So I do lean the under, but I didn't want to play it against you, obviously.